This happened a couple of weeks, I feel like 2 weeks ago. But and I think you may have mentioned it, but my Vegas trip, always interferes with some of the stuff. Katie Halper, who I think most people are probably aware of who she is. She's done a podcast for a long time. She had the Katie Halper Show. I think she's still doing that show with Taibi. What's that called?
Useful Idiots.
Useful Idiots. That's ironic, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. But apparently she also worked for The Hill. I got to be honest. And I never watched The Hill. So I wasn't quite aware of this. Phone lines are not open yet. We will get right there. All right. Phone lines are open. But she's been working on The Hill and been doing, I guess, brief editorials, I guess you would call it.
Okay.
And apparently, a couple of weeks ago, she prepared an editorial in defense of Rashida Tlaib's comments on our policy towards Israel. Now, look, we have a major problem in democratic politics, it seems to me. One, and it's twofold. One is AIPAC, a political action group that is dedicated to lobbying on behalf of the worst elements of the Israeli government. And I should say, not always, not necessarily always the Israeli government. They are very much aligned with the most rightward conservative elements of the Israeli government. Now, with that said, the Israeli government as a whole, and I think the society itself, has moved further to the right over the past 20, 30 years. But nevertheless, AIPAC's a real problem. They've been dumping millions of dollars. We're going to talk to Ryan Grimm about a piece that he wrote. Millions upon millions of dollars in Democratic primaries to take out progressives, because progressive Democrats, and really it's happening throughout the Democratic Party to some extent. This is supposed to chill. This is both to eliminate certain progressive Democrats and to act as a disciplining of the Democratic Party, which increasingly is becoming more and more skeptical about having no conditions on the billions of dollars of aid we provide Israel because of their human rights abuses.
And what's useful for the way that AIPAC and other right-wing Israeli groups are funneling money into these primaries and into these elections to knock down progressive Democrats is that if you are progressive on and you're critical of Israeli apartheid, you're also probably going to be in favor of very high taxes on corporations, the wealthy, Medicare for all, other leftist positions where corporate and moneyed interests can use AIPAC as a fig leaf, to borrow a phrase that we used from earlier in the program, for the squashing of those other efforts by leftist candidates, so that you kind of get it's not just a twofer, but an eightfer. Yep. When you're going after, say, Nina Turner. And
the fact is, AIPAC has, in this new project that they've launched to attack progressives in the Democratic Party, they're getting a lot of funding from Republicans too. So I mean, that is the backdrop. And so like I say, Halper's been working on The Hill for at The Hill, the publication, for years. Apparently, she wrote an editorial that she was going to deliver on Talib's comments about Israeli apartheid. And we should also say, this is not really controversial. There are not only multiple human rights groups that everyone references in every other context in which we talk about human rights that refer to what's going on in Israel as apartheid. Yeah. You have former Israeli prime ministers, former heads of Mossad and Shin Bet. You have former military personnel in Israel who have all, over the years, not even a recent phenomenon, over the years referred to what's going on in Israel as apartheid. Apartheid is, you know, there should be normative assessments of what of apartheid, but as a factual matter, you have a state where you have basically a whole cohort of second-class citizens. You have people who are occupied. You have people who are second-class citizens. You have people who are unable to move freely throughout the occupied territories or to leave them. You have basically an open-air prison in Gaza with, 50% unemployment.
Almost no clean drinking water in the West Bank and Gaza whatsoever.
This is not controversial. I mean, the Israeli government has decided that it's sustainable and this is what they want. But the idea that it's apartheid is not a controversial statement, except for in very conservative areas. And I should say, you know, when you have millions of dollars that start to line up to take out people who will echo these human rights groups, echo these Israeli officials. And so she was writing this editorial, and apparently she was told at one point by a Hill editor-in-chief Bob Cusack, said it's not in our sweet spot of coverage. Halper asked, and this is an account that I got from Brando Marketek over at, and I think he's writing in
Jacobin.
He's writing in Jacobin. When Halper asked him explicitly if the segment was being nixed because it was about Israel, he confirmed that that was the rationale, and that the Hill's focus is largely on domestic, not foreign policy. Soon she was told, and I mean, it's one thing to say your focus isn't there, but this is not like a 45-minute documentary she's doing. She's, you know, I don't know, a couple of minute editorial piece.
And it's not, The Hill is not a magazine that comes out monthly. There's pieces churning in and out of that site every single day. They publish a lot of things.
Well, this is on the TV show, isn't it?
What's Rashida Tlaib's job? Is she a domestic politician?
I mean, so. But she said something about foreign policy.
Okay,
I mean, give me a break. I'm sure they never carried anything about Ilhan Omar's comments about Israel. Never, I'm sure. Or about, Israeli lobbyists. Anyway, soon she was told by an executive in an email that they wouldn't need her to record a show that next day. We wish you all the best, was the sign off. And Marketek goes on to write, it's not clear what Cusack was referring to when he said Hill doesn't cover foreign policy. In the past week alone, rising other co-hosts have run segments on the Brazilian election, Italy's new neo-fascist prime minister, the South Korean president's hot mic scandal, and multiple segments on the war in Ukraine.
I mean, hot mic scandals, you got to bump coverage to go to hot mic scandals.
That's clicky.
Maybe there's only so many countries that start with I that you can cover. I'm not sure how that works. And then having basically an editorial process for these particular segments turns out to be a rather new innovation at the Hill, because Ryan Grimm was, as you know, a host there. He recorded more than 150 radars. That's what I guess they call their editorial segments, or these, this little, that's how they package it. And he says, quote, this was Grimm, "There is no approval process. The hosts simply upload their script to a teleprompter and record." Crystal Ball, who co-hummed the show for years, says that while she and co-host Sagar and Jetty faced occasional pushback on certain topics, they were never blocked from guests or topics. And apparently, The Hill was recently sold to media conglomerate Nexstar Media Group for $130 million last August. This past month, Saget Value Holdings Company, an investment firm based in Tel Aviv, bought 6,100 shares in Nexstar to the tune of more than $1 million. Look, I don't know why they did it, except for they're a conservative outlet. And to the extent that they let any type of progressive voices on there, it is a means in which to get clicks. And, this is a problem. It's not. Here's the thing. the notion of independent media, these concepts are all, it's just a marketing thing. And it certainly is, everyone has their biases. I can tell you this. We no longer do a show on Peacock. For about a year, this show reran on Peacock. And then for about, 9 months, was it? We did a second show that was almost exclusively interviews. And I can tell you, we had people on talking about Israel and the influence of Israeli lobbyists on our government. We had people talking about, Andreas Mont, we had people who were writing an argument that there should be specific sabotage of instruments of fossil fuel extraction as part of the environmental movement. We had the executive director of the union that was unionizing MSNBC and Peacock on the program, not once, but twice. In all the time that we did all of those shows, regardless of what the topic was, we never, ever, ever heard a single thing from Peacock. Now, part of that just might be they just weren't paying attention, which I think is part of it. I don't think they cared. To the extent that we ever got any blowback, it had nothing to do with politics outside of the corporate structure. And fortunately, when I signed that deal, I didn't negotiate on money. I didn't negotiate on there was almost nothing I negotiated on except for you have no editorial control. None whatsoever. I'm willing to hear you out on certain things, but you have no editorial control. And,
they honored that, right? I mean, yeah.
They had no choice.
Yeah.
It was in the contract. If there was ever, and like I say, to the extent that they ever had any issues with, the content, it was not about the politics. It just wasn't.
Yeah.
I don't think that they agreed with my politics, but you just can't tell where this is, what areas. But this is, clearly an instance where Katie Halper exposed one thing you're not going to hear on the Hill.
Right.
And who knows what the other things are? Maybe just they didn't come up. But certainly, and I have no doubt that if I guess it's just surprising to see it online. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm not shocked that this is the one issue that they've decided to step in on, especially if it seems like they have like some new ownership structure. But this is the third rail for a lot of these publications, and the fact that it's the case here, it's not the case in other countries, and you have groups like Amnesty International calling Israeli apartheid what it is. So, as I said last week when this came up, solidarity with Katie Halper and with anybody who's criticizing Israel and Israeli apartheid in the media, and they should get our full support unless it comes from a right-wing anti-Semitic perspective. But for our purposes, if you're criticizing Israel and the apartheid and the suppression of Palestinians, and you have our support.
And the content of Halper's piece was what Sam said was all these other institutions that we look towards monitoring human rights are unequivocal about this at this point.
Yeah.
Peacock, awesome. Sam, we understand Peacock didn't have editorial control, but sincerely, you don't even get 5,000 live viewers. The Hill's podcasts and videos are watched by hundreds, thousands more. Of course, censorship comes in when there's influence in the content creators. Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know how many people were watching us on Peacock. I don't know if it was 5,000 or 10,000 or whatnot. And you may be right. I mean, we have, a live show. Ultimately, our daily shows will get anywhere from like 20 to 40,000, somewhere between the two shows that we put out. Not to mention tens of thousands on the audio podcast. But they weren't concerned. Now, maybe they would be more concerned if we had a broader viewership. It's possible. I don't know what 100,000 viewers means any difference at the end of the day.
Maybe has made a lot of the points that Halper made on Peacock.
Good point. Sure. Great point.
And probably on MSNBC.
Yeah.
And so it is harder to know at different points where what outlets are going to be censoring what at any given point.
Yeah, like this analysis, I think, like of there's the mainstream corporate press, which is the major networks, and then there's everybody else, is a bit faulty. Like the smaller corporate platforms might be even more heavy-handed than larger ones.
And I will also say this that is important to keep in mind. There used to be this sort of criticism of some of the cable news that they're just chasing ratings. I reiterate, there is no more ratings sensitive platform than YouTube. When some dude sitting in his garage looks at what's getting him clicks or her clicks, and the impulse to keep going down that road is overwhelming. And so if you stumble upon like, hey, if I'm a little skeptical about this, public health policy or that one, and then all of a sudden the whole channel becomes that. Yeah. And you ride it out. So don't kid yourself.
Yeah, the profit motive can still get you just because you're not at MSNBC.
Of course.
Breaking news. People in media try to do things for clicks, and it's not just completely siloed with CNN and MSNBC. Yeah.
Now let me ask you this too: was there was there like an en masse resignation over at the Hill or what?
No, Brianna Joy Gray did record a video saying she disagrees and has a tough time justifying continuing her presence at the Hill because of the Halper firing.
She didn't resign?
No,
though?
she's still there.
Oh, okay.
Did anybody resign?
Not that I know of.
Really? Who? I don't know who hosts any of those shows now. Are there multiple shows?
I mean, look, I know there's like Robbie Soev, the libertarian guy, Olemi Alurin. I think she's good.
Oh yeah, she's good.
But I don't know.
I'm surprised that nobody sort of threatened to resign in that situation.
I mean, I think Bree probably got the closest to it.
No. All right. Doesn't she have her own show, though?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Let's go to... Let's take a phone call, for gosh sakes. We spent a lot of time on that.
Well, I mean, look, I'm glad we got to expand on it because I think we said something, what was it, last week when you were in Vegas, maybe Tuesday or Wednesday, but it wasn't... we didn't spend too much time on it, so...